today's video, I want to share potentially my most controversial opinion about guitars and guitar gear, and that is that modelers sound better than amplifiers. I recently had this epiphany after picking up a Nano Cortex. I've tried various different amp modelers, but there's always been something about the Quad Cortex captures and sounds, or sorry, not the Quad Cortex, the Neural DSP captures, that to me has always just sounded better. I've watched hours of shootouts between Fractal, Helix, Quad Cortex, all of these things. And what I discovered was I actually prefer the sound of the Quad, even though if you watch some other people's videos, they'll compare things against the Tonex is often praised as being one of the most accurate kind of sounding captures. And while null tests and everything have kind of shown that the Tonex is just as accurate, if not more accurate than anything that Neural DSP has put out, I found that I always preferred the sound. And this experience of the Neural DSP stuff, to my ears always sounding better, has triggered some thoughts that have been percolating around my brain for the last month or so. And I just wanted to give my kind of 5 main reasons that I think the modelers are better than amps. Now, quick disclaimer, I don't think you should get rid of your tube amp. Honestly, if money and space was no issue, I would have a couple nice Fender tube amps that just kind of sat around. But sadly, I don't, so I won't. And when you kind of get into this, everybody can use whatever they want. I love real amps too, but I genuinely believe that modelers sound better, and here's my kind of 5-point defense of that. So, a lot of people sometimes get sensitive about the fact that with a modeler, there's no amp in the room sound. And this is something that kind of makes me laugh sometimes, which, don't get me wrong, it's different. It is different, but you can get very close to an amp in a room sound by hooking your modeler up to either an FRFR speaker or a little PA speaker. FRFR speakers are basically repackaged PA speakers specifically for guitarists. And I personally use a PA speaker 98% of the time when I'm playing. If I'm on a gig, I'm using a PA speaker and it feels like I have an amp. I honestly don't notice any difference. There are some people who are particularly sensitive to this, but I actually find that I enjoy playing with the PA speaker more than a traditional amp, because anyone who's gigged with amps before knows that you often get a problem of kind of directionality with them, where the sound will project at a certain space. Often the amp is on the floor. Maybe you can lift it, but even still, it kind of shoots straight. There's been many times back when I was using real amps where I would hear videos that like my friends in the audience took, and they would upload them to Instagram, whatever, and I'd go, do I really sound like that? That's not what I heard on stage, because the directionality of a guitar amp speaker often will affect what you hear. So for example, if you're playing through something like a Fender Deluxe and you're standing, maybe you can tip it back or whatever, but there's still going to be a proximity effect that kind of changes what you hear. So you might dial in a sound that isn't what you actually want because that's what you hear on the stage. With amp modelers, I have always found that I get kind of the sound that I expect. There might be tiny little things where I have to cut out bass or whatever, but it doesn't really affect me. And then with the amp and room sound thing, this is one that always makes me laugh, because every guitar tone that's ever moved you that you've loved and you've been influenced by, other than live, was on a record. It was recorded through, and that's what modelers do. They mimic what a microphone sounds like in front of a guitar amp, and there's a whole bunch of tweakability in it. So to me and myself, someone who's very interested in recording and does a lot of recording, I love that I can use kind of these fancy tricks like EQs and different mics or whatever to treat it almost like I was in a studio but get that sound everywhere. So it's a really, really tweakable system, and the room amp in a room sound to me is a little bit of an interesting issue. The second point that I would like to bring up is the flexibility introduced with IRs, where you can change out the speaker, you can change out the microphone, you can change out the microphone distance, you can change out the speaker and the microphone distance. You have so much more tweakability in your final sound with IRs, and also the fact that you can have a huge EQ like you would in a studio. Like, for example, some of my patches on the Nano Cortex have a whole bunch of cuts and pluses or whatever that mimic what I would be doing when I recorded my guitar in Logic. So again, you can really get granular and just microscopic little tweaks to really tighten things up. Like, say you have a guitar or an amp that you really love but the low mids are busy. You can notch out specific frequencies, whereas if it was a traditional amp, you're basically just guessing between bass, mid, and treble what you're going to get. So the tweakability and the customization of sounds in a modeler cannot be beat. That kind of goes without saying, but I think it's a really, really often undersold point where people get so obsessed with the idea of them sounding like real guitar amps, like the real deal, that they forget the fact that they can actually sound better. You know, that's kind of the goal of technological advances, is advancing the technology and getting better sounds. So I'm a really big believer that the tweakability of modelers, and even if they don't sound 100% like the real amp, oftentimes they can sound better. I think most of us have had an experience where, you know, certain amps at certain volumes get mushy, or they get too loud, or they distort. You can create sounds that literally don't exist in the real world with a modeler. And I think that's something that's really, really worthwhile and interesting. The third one is a very, very simple one. Modelers weigh next to nothing. I've spent many years of my life carting around heavy Fender tube amps on public transit, and I do not miss it at all. I can fit my whole rig in my guitar case, and then if I have to bring a PA speaker to hook it up to, there's no house amp or there's no PA system, I put it in a little shoulder bag and I carry it. It weighs, I think my PA speaker weighs about 13, 14 pounds, and the Nano Cortex weighs like a pound. Like it's nothing. It's so much easier to get around. It's small, it's portable, and it just works. So that's a huge plus in my opinion as someone who's a working musician. Obviously, if you're just playing at home and you never really moved around, or you know, you take it out once every couple months for a gig, it's not that big of a deal. For someone who plays multiple gigs a month, just being able to take everything in a guitar case and a shoulder bag is a game changer. The fourth huge advantage of this is that you get multiple amps that are really, really great sounding in one package, versus I find a lot of the time you kind of have to pick and choose with amplifiers. Like there's particular amplifiers I really like the gain of. So if I was going for a really crunchy, distorted lead sound, but I also really like the cleans of a different style of amp. So for example, I can go from this, sorry, volume knobs help. This is my main patch. And it's a Rev Joey Landreth D25. Just a capture I decided to try around and mess with. I find it's a really, really nice, Fender-y sounding. It's an American sounding amp, but I find the highs to be a little bit less harsh. And then just by pressing this button, I have a cranked Bogner Shiva for all of my, super saturated lead needs and anything in between. So the fact that you can kind of shift between those, to me, is incredible. I know there's a lot of stuff, like I used to have a 100-watt Marshall half stack. It was awesome. But, you know, switching between I never liked the clean sound that much. The distortion sound was great. And then, you know, there's just a whole bunch of stuff with that where I love how easy it is to have drastically different tones. And with a modeler, in the case of the Nano Cortex, I have 4 patches that are basically instantly call-upable. And that, to me, is incredible. The fifth and final thing that, oh my God, I don't think I could live without, is how seamlessly they can work with recording and with your workflow there. It is so simple. My setup lives here, and I can record basically anything whenever I want. I don't have to set up a microphone. I don't have to set up an interface. I don't have to do whatever. My Nano Cortex lives plugged into my interface here, and then when I go for a gig, I just unplug the cable that's going to my interface, pack it up, and then bring it to the gig, and then when I come back, I put it in. It integrates so seamlessly with my setup, with everything that I do. I can record at quiet volumes when my wife goes to bed earlier than me. I don't piss off my neighbors because I have to have my amp loud to get a distorted sound. The practicality of the device is absolutely incredible. And again, we're at a point where you can't really argue that you can hear the digitalness of it. I've done multiple recording projects where I've sent in just raw tracks that I recorded at home, and the producer has asked me, hey, what amp did you use? And I go, oh, well, it's the Deluxe on my Nano Cortex, or it's a Deluxe on my HX Stomp, or it's a Deluxe on my whatever. And they're always amazed that it's not a real tube amp. So if I can fool professionals who do this for a living, no offense, no matter how much cork you like to sniff, it's luck. It's luck of the draw, or it's a bad example, is basically the only way that you would be able to tell. The tech has come so far, and for all of the pros that it offers, I think it still gets treated with an unreasonable amount of suspicion. So there's my most controversial take on guitar gear. Let me know if you think I'm an asshole and completely wrong in the comments, I guess. But those are my thoughts, and I stand by them. I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below if you have any experience with this. I do think, again, everyone should use whatever inspires them to play and gets them the results that they want, but I always see modelers kind of getting dragged by people saying that they'll never get there when I think they're already there. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. It truly helps me out more than you can know. If you want to take a guitar lesson with me, there's a link to get in touch with me down in the description. I'd love to work with you on whatever's troubling you on the guitar. If you're looking for a way to support me and what I'm up to here, you can check out my Patreon page, linked down below. All of my patrons get early access to videos as well as cool behind-the-scenes sneak peeks that I don't share anywhere else, and it's just a wonderful little community of guitar lovers, so I'd love to see you over there. Another great way to support me and what I'm up to is to check out my ebooks and my video courses, also linked down below. It's a great way to get some more in-depth educational content from me than I can go into in a 10 to 15 minute YouTube video. And last but not least, I have new videos coming out every single Monday and Thursday, so I hope I'll see you in the next one. And until I do, I'll wish you a wonderful day, and I hope you have some fun playing the guitar. Thanks.